Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Norton, and I'm the founder of People Plus Purpose, and I'm with Pam Keys, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Team. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I just felt like we needed to have this conversation as you are a recent graduate of the People Plus Purpose Leadership Coach Certification Training Program, and I know you've been doing some great things already with what you've learned in your company. And I thought it would be valuable for those people who need or may feel like they need this sort of training and what they could bring to the business that they're in, that it would be good to get your voice in contributing to that. So as the COO of Team, um, how are you putting into practice already what you have learned in going through the certification training?
Yeah, I was super excited when I realized that this was available to me. We took a step back and we decided to do assessments on all of our current employees because we really wanted to focus more on their development. What makes them unique? What are their strengths? Where can we help them to grow? I think a lot of companies focus on performance. Everybody talks about performance reviews. And really, if we're doing a fantastic job of continuously checking in with our team members, they already know how they're performing. But can we do development reviews? Can we really start focusing on who they are, what they bring to their role, what they bring to the company, and then how do we help grow and develop that? And that's how we're using the assessments today. It's also helping us to really learn a little bit more about them and their communication styles. I think a lot of people have heard about the love languages, right? And so when we talk about love languages, it's how do we all receive love? And it's very different. Communication isn't any different. And this gives us, I think a lot of times people don't know, they know how they communicate, they don't know how to define that to someone else. But when leaders and fellow team members learn that about each other, we become a more cohesive team when we're communicating with each other and the way that people receive that. And so that's another way that we're really starting to learn about each other and be better together.
That's great. Were there specific challenges that, at least that you were aware of then, or even looking back in retrospect before you went through this training and began to implement this, that you were experiencing as far as the company goes, as far as leaders, departments, and that sort of thing? Were there specific things that you feel like we were not quite operating at full speed?
I think the challenges are as we're a growing company, and it's so easy for us to get caught up in the business and in the growth. And, we talk a lot, and you and I have talked about this, the data, right? Like as a business, we're constantly looking at the numbers because the numbers tell us a story and they tell us where we've been and where we're going. But I think what nobody's quantified or talks a lot about is the data of the people.
Mm,
The people are the foundation of a company. And so if we're not pouring our energy, if we're not pouring our resources, and if we're not being intentional where the foundation, our people are concerned, how do we expect the company to grow and be successful? And when we get intentional about our people, I think success follows because the people feel it. You hear a lot about people talking about the culture of excellence. Well, the culture of excellence is really developing and being intentional with our people. And this is a great tool to be able to do that.
yeah, that's great. That's great. It makes me always think about Gallup in concluding that 70% of the global workplace is not really engaged. And then their proposed solution elements were that we need to, if we can create a strengths-based workplace, if we can have a more purpose-driven rather than just paycheck-driven mission, and that if we could have ongoing growth and development per what some of what you were saying there, then I think we have answers. And that's been my experience in working in this area. So as you went through this 12-week certification training program that was infused with our own proprietary assessments, those four different assessment dimensions. Was there anything that was uniquely surprising or particularly rewarding for you in going through that and how that's kind of equipped you for next in your career?
Well, I think as a company, what was surprising for me as I looked at those was the inspiration sources. I think really getting to that's the why behind why people do what they do, right? And, being able to tap into that, I think kind of what you're talking about, people are not fulfilled in their role. 70% of people aren't. And why is that? For most people, it's not the financial. Like people, I mean, that drives us. We all have to make money to survive,
Mhm.
but people want to end their days being excited to wake up. And most people don't do that. We talk a lot about TGIM, thank God it's Monday. Are we creating a thank God it's Monday culture?
Mm.
And I think that tapping into people's inspiration sources, the why behind what they do, is helping us gain ground. I'm not going to say we're there. We've just started on this and we are just scratching the surface of it. But I think we are doing a much better job as a company in solving some of those things than we were 90 days ago.
Great. Uh, how are you playing this out even more specifically in with because you mentioned that you made the decision, or you with the CEO of the company made the decision to get the core four assessments for all of your team members. Uh, then you got the results, and how are you playing out those results and sharing insights or coming up with strategies? How are you using that with your people?
Yeah, so we're using it in a couple of different ways. I'm working directly with the leads of most of the departments, helping them to understand how do they use the assessments within their departments. I've also had an opportunity to work with one of our departments in particular because we're in a transitional period of a new lead coming in. And so I've got to do a little bit more one-on-one with that department. And it has been so exciting. They're excited. The team is excited because it's back to the defining things. So many of them knew so much about themselves, but they didn't know how to define it. And I think it's validating for them to take this unbiased assessment and the results come out and go, okay, no, that is who I am. And one of the things we're also encouraging everybody, and I think that's something that you taught me, was we're not going to focus on the low scores. Like that's not, we want to focus on what are you really good at and how do we develop that? And I think people are empowered by
Mhm.
that. So as we talk about those things, individually, here's where you're really good at. Now, how do we start applying that and developing it more in the role that you're in? We haven't really come across a time. I think sometimes these assessments also can be used. Do you have the right people in the right seat? Because
Mhm.
that's super important. We haven't come across a time yet that we have discovered that quite yet. But I don't know that it'll be much of an issue as we move forward because we're using these a little bit different. But I think that's a way that they can be used also, is really defining that as we hire also. But right now we're doing good, and our leads are learning more about them. The team is learning more about themselves. And what we're also talking about with each other is I've kind of paired individuals up to talk about their assessments with each
Mhm.
other, how they may be different, because I also think it's important that we not only learn about ourselves, but we also learn about the other types, because that makes us better and it gives us more grace when we work together.
And they've been appreciating that. They've been finding value and enjoying the process of that with you.
Very much. They love it. Like it's been super fun because, they're coming back and they're like, oh my goodness, this is not an area I'm really good at. And so is really good at that. And they were giving me tips on how I could be, maybe it's better organized. How can I be better organized? Or, it's that collaboration as well. I think that people I think are naturally collaborative. They like we feed off of each other. And even when it's somebody that's different than us, we get a little bit more creative when we get to talk about those things, especially when it's one-on-one. I think it's a great bonder as well. I really want to continue doing that, just kind of switching people up, because I think it makes us work better as a team when we're learning about each other and we get that one-on-one. We're a strictly remote company. And so we also have to be creative.
Yeah.
Uh, we don't get those team bonding times once a month or once a quarter, and we do it in other ways, but this one-on-one I think is important, and it's a win-win when they get to bond, but they also get to learn about the different people within the organization that are different than them where these strengths are concerned.
Yes. Now, for those people who are listening and saying, okay, so I'm not a chief operating officer and I'm not part of a large growing company with departments and leads, et cetera. So for those listening who are maybe have smaller businesses and just less roles involved in the organization, professional offices, say, for example, uh, what would you say to them based on the fact that in your background you used to be a dental office manager, and I know you said to me that if you had known some of this back then, it would have made a difference for you. So speak to that for just a little bit for all those people listening who have more, that's more describes who they are.
I wish I would have had this tool back then. I think when you and I have talked about this before, I had also shared that, oh, I could have been a much better leader than I was. I did okay. But a lot of it was learning on the job. And I wasn't really, part of what this assessment does also is talks about our emotional agility. So I think my emotional agility was a lot lower back then. I wasn't quite of aware of how I affected other people. I really kind of I don't think I led, I managed. So I
Hmm.
came in and it was kind of this is how we're doing it and this is and had I had a tool like this to first learn about myself and then learn how to lead different people in the way that they need to be led, we could probably go back and pull everybody I managed, we're going to use managed at
Mhm.
that period of time and say she did fine, but boy had she led us like this, what we could have done. And I think I shared with you, like, part of me would love to go back to the doctor that I worked with and say, I'm sorry, like I probably could have got us a lot farther had I been leading our people and not managing them. And so I look at this and I think, boy, I wish, when you become in most healthcare practices, your office or practice manager is the individual that is doing their job the best, who knows it, knows most of the processes, knows how to do the role better than anybody else. And we usually just promote because of that. We're not promoting them, generally speaking, because of their leadership skills. It's just they've got the job figured out and they can tell everybody else how to do it and train new people how to do it. And I think what we have to start looking at is that's fine. There's a lot of, if we would have based me getting that position off of that, I probably would have never received it. But if somebody would have invested in me to grow me as a leader, I could have been light years ahead of what it took me to get there eventually. And again, I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, whether you're in a large corporation, a very large size company, or a smaller individual private practice. Are we investing in our people? If as a doctor or owner, you really rely on your practice manager to help run most of your business, you're busy being a doctor. And then after hours, a lot of times figuring out the business side of things, right? But they're running your practice for you. Why not invest in them? Why not take this information and invest in them where they can really lead and make your practice successful from the people side? Because again, when we make that foundational, our practice will follow suit because people are invested. The culture of excellence, they're there, they want to be there. It just comes with everything else. We can teach everybody systems, processes, but when we're investing in who they are and developing them, I can only see growth for them as an individual as well as the team and the company.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And it feels validating for me, given all the experiences that you've had up to this point in your career, for you to have seen all of this. Because in my years of coaching, mostly in small to medium businesses, and especially in the world of professional businesses like different elements of healthcare, I've worked with a lot of genius smart people who are incredibly technically skilled, but did not really learn business in school, and even less so how to lead people. And yet suddenly there's people there that are needing to be led, guided. Uh, and I think to your point too, people end up in office managerial roles, sometimes due to longevity or because they were like a front office person and they were available when some management role became available. And so we've talked about that in terms of having this be a leadership coach certification for within the businesses, not necessarily for people to always think they're going to go out and become official coaches or have their own coaching company, which is what the original idea was when I designed the program. But I've adapted it greatly because of our conversations and made it to where even through in a small group approach to make this available for office managers or other key leaders within the business so they can be the guides, the coaches, the mentors on the people side of the business for greater success. So is there anything more that you would want to add to anything there?
I think the only other thing I would say is, as you're looking at your business, you may have an office manager or practice manager you want to invest in, or maybe you're not even sure that they're the right person and they have the emotional agility at this time to develop into that. Maybe it's going to take longer than you think. I would even encourage people to consider doing something like this for their team. Sometimes when we invest in people, someone we thought was not a good leader, they rise out of that because we're developing them, we're investing in them. So I think it's even worth for people to look at it from that aspect. Also, is just it's right person, right seat, and everybody's a leader in one way or another. It may not be that they actually take on the role of a lead, but if we're investing in our people, your people are the leaders of your culture. A business owner cannot hold the culture on their own. They define it and it rolls from there. But investing, if you really want a good culture, invest in your people because they'll lead it and they'll own it on your behalf if you're doing that.
Well, thank you, Pam. It's been
Thanks for having
it's
me.
it's been an absolute pleasure working with you in going through the coach certification training program. It's a joy for me to watch to see your enthusiasm and what you're doing and in your COO role with team. And I'm excited for where things can go from here. So I appreciate your time and coming on and just kind of sharing your own experience and in hopes that others may be inspired by that. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I've loved working with you and look forward to continuing to work with you in one shape or form.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Take care,
Thanks.
everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye.